Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving.
We will also fully acknowledge the haunting specter behind the music that moved us then and again today with this brief recitation from the oratorio.
Matthew attended a meeting of the University of Wyoming's Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender Association, then joined others for coffee at the College Inn. Around 10:30, he went to the Five-Side Bar, where he later met Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson. Near midnight, they drove him to a remote area, tied him to a split rail fence, beat him horribly, and left him to die in the cold of night.
Last thing we did last night, Joyce and I stood here in front of this poster, and this morning Joyce is the one who walked in with the bulk purchase of tissues. Welcome. On November 9th, members of this congregation joined representatives, friends, and allies of Pride Rustic and Equality Maine, several traveling on the Pride Ride originating in Presque Isle. We attended Considering Matthew Shepard at the Collins Center in Orono. More than 175 musicians were on stage, a piano, a string ensemble, and an electric guitar. And a very busy percussionist. Choir and solos in traditional songs. There was also yodeling. Recitations from news stories that marked the hours, the days, the weeks and months following Matthew's murder. We were 41 strong, and the emotion-packed afternoon was made even more meaningful by our fellowship. Through music, poetry, and a panel discussion, we hope to share memories from that day and reflections on the tragedy that animated it. A special welcome this morning to Nate Menefield, director of the Maine Gay Men's Chorus, who has traveled back to Aroostook County where he grew up to be with us, and to friends from Pride Aroostook. Thanks to each of you for being here to share. Welcome all to our Unitarian Universalist family. Claire and Emily, would you please come forward and light the chalice to begin our service. Emily will read from the oratorio's libretto.
As the news began to spread, many people across the country gathered together in candlelight vigils, moved to silently speak for life over death, love over hate, light over darkness.
Thank you, Emily and Claire. In UU tradition, we will pause in silence for a moment of centering and remembrance. Nate, would you sound the singing bowl, please? Years ago on a road trip, our own Mary Alice Mallory made the pilgrimage to the fence in Laramie, Wyoming. It moved her to write the poem we'll hear her read now.
Laramie, Part 1. Fence posts, wind, swept snow, blue skies, and mountain ranges that go on and on and on. It is cold, and I wonder, How cold was it on the October night when Matthew Shepard was put on a fence post? I watched the snow molded by the wind, stilled in the cold. I see the outline of Matthew's face, his tears that wash away the blood. Part 2. There are fence posts everywhere along Interstate 80. They protect the travelers from the wind, from the snow. They did not protect Matthew. Matthew's tears are seared into my heart, and white snow is everywhere, and I am remembering the angels on the day of his funeral. Angels conceived and made real from deep inside the hearts of those who loved and wanted to protect and honor his life. Part 3. We stayed in Laramie overnight. It was cold, windy, and Matthew's memory was everywhere. We went to a supper club. I felt the angels shivering around the table as I met the glare of a woman who may have guessed that we were queer, or maybe she was just hard from life. Whatever, it made me shiver and be glad for the angels. Why were there no angels to save Matthew on the night when he was tormented, teased, beaten, and left to die? The waitress said she was in high school when it happened. There are still flowers at the fence post. It's down by the Walmart. It is a hard thing to have a town known for. Part 4. The night is dark, inky black. The wind still blows. The temperature drops. Matthew and the angels and all those who continue to love against all odds are dancing around in the room I share with my girlfriend, my sweetheart. We wrap each other in our arms, surrender and remember. The sun rises, the angels, they come again. I breathe. Acknowledge the angels, the memory. I breathe a prayer for Matthew, for love.
Mac, would you, Ernest Mac is our usher at the church. Would you pass the plates for donations? All will be gratefully received. Following that, we will have our panel join us. I should have mentioned also donations to our Pishka are on the piano and to the Friends of the Frisbee Organ Fund as well. Anybody wanting to place a donation there? At the center of our service today will be the panel discussion. Let's welcome again Nate Benefield from the Maine Gay Men's Chorus. Silver Smith joins us. She's a youth member of Pride and Rustic. Thank you both for traveling here to be with us. From our own congregation, Lou Ellis Grant, Reagan Nelson. Each panelist brings a unique and personal perspective to the discussion. Questions from the floor will be welcome, and from attendees on Zoom, and it looks like we have a crowd on Zoom as well. You can raise your hands from the floor, and keep in mind there will be time for questions at the end as well. And I really hope that we've budgeted quite a bit of time, and we've kind of changed the usual order of service for our services here to accommodate that. I hope there's a lot of discussion here. I hope there's interaction there. I prepared 8 questions, and I think we'll have a really great day if we only get through 4 or 5 of them. First question, or talking point, is for Nate. Given the enormity of issues around the murder of Matthew Shepard and the events place in the history of LGBT equality and civil rights, what was on the minds of yourself and other organizers as you staged this huge work of music in Orono, Maine?
Thank you. First of all, good morning, everyone. Hello.
Good morning.
Thank you for welcoming me so warmly. Again, my name is Nate Benefield, and as you said, I'm from the county originally. I was born and raised in Limestone, and so thanks for an excuse to give me a little mini homecoming this weekend. Always a joy to be back, and especially to get to connect my professional life with my growing up life, right, and home. What a fabulous question, and a really loaded one at that. I think in response, I would sort of look back in time a little bit first, well before this performance, well before some of our members were even born, and think about sort of the long history of civil rights broadly in this country. And what comes to mind first are some of those moments that were really turning points for various fights that were for rights that were taking place over the course of the last century plus. I think of, obviously, the murder of Matthew Shepard as being a turning point in the fight for LGBTQ plus rights and visibility. But I also think of the murder of Emmett Till in 1955 in a fight for racial equality, right, for Black Americans. And although those circumstances were really different on the surface, I think one thing they have in common is that those particular events forced folks all over the country to confront with eyes wide open what the reality was and what the horror was and the struggles were for different groups of people, when it otherwise might have been easy, I think, for some to sort of turn a blind eye. I think of Emmett Till's mother, Mamie, who, against much of the advice at the time to not have an open casket, said, no, people need to see what happened to my son. And I think, to me, that is one of the most haunting photos in American history, period, of what he looked like as a 14-year-old boy. And so, kind of bringing that forward, I think carrying that into Matthew Shepard, our membership in the Maine Gay Men's Chorus, we have about 60 singers in the group. We had about 27, I think, of those 60 who participated in the Considering Matthew Shepard performance, which brought together 4 choirs, 4 different choruses from around the state in performance. We have a pretty wide age range of folks in our membership. And so for some people, they were very closely tied to the events of Matthew Shepard's death in particular. I think of one member we have who lived very near Laramie, Wyoming when it happened. And so this whole experience was just really fresh for him all these many years later. And we have members who were not even close to being born yet. And everything in between. And so as we set about, as organizers, putting this performance together, I think one of the things that was really top of mind for us aside from wanting to do justice to the music and putting on a wonderful musical performance, was really how do we take care of and support each other as we prepare this musical but really emotional journey that we realized was going to hit people in different times and in very different ways, depending on their proximity to this particular story. And I think one of the things that surprised me and I think many other folks is that, you know, some of our singing members asked along the way, they're like, how do I sing this without crying, right? And part of my advice to them was I said, you know, some of it is just practice. You know, it's taking care, it's checking in. This is as much as I said, an emotional journey as a musical one. And so that was very much a part of the process, was just embracing all of the feelings as they came. But I think what we expected was that we would sort of work through that over the course of the rehearsal process, and then finally be fairly comfortable getting on stage to perform and feel, you know, confident about working through that piece of it. And I think what surprised many of us was that it was actually the reverse that happened. There were things that on stage, there were moments when, you know, members who were reading or singing, you know, broke in rehearsal and were like, this has never hit me this way before. But when all of the elements came together, as you said, we were a force of about 175 musicians on stage, and all those elements together, not just musically, but really I think emotionally joining in that experience, was a unique once-in-a-lifetime experience that really only happened that weekend and that we hold near and dear. And so really, I think the biggest thing was how do we take care of each other and support our participants through this process is what was top of mind for us.
I have to tell you, various members, friends that I've talked to, like, how did they only perform that once, put all that work in, and not perform it on multiple occasions? It was so magnificent.
Thank you.
Talking point for the group. When you heard about the presentation of Considering Matthew Shepard, did you spend time learning more about the topic? Was it personal for you in any specific way? What led you to choose to participate? And anybody who wants to, go ahead and start.
Well, I felt like I wanted to participate to be kind of like within the LGBTQ community. It's something that I haven't really, I came out after high school, and like after that, I still wasn't really involved in the community. And I felt like it was something that I wanted to kind of put myself out there to be involved with. And so hearing that it was coming to Orono, Maine, I was like, I'm going to put myself out there and go with my lovely partner and participate in something that I now feel comfortable participating in.
I wasn't even aware of who Matthew Shepard was in 1998, so Mary Alice gave me a briefing on what it was all about. And all it reminded me, 1998 was just a year that was really difficult for me personally, with cancer, Parkinson's disease, et cetera, but it just brought back Charlie Howard, which you wrote about in our program today, and that was big for me. And that was just memories.
I remember when I first learned about it, when it was presented to me by a couple of other board members. It might have even been Stephen. And like you, I didn't know who Matthew Shepard was. I wasn't. I have a good excuse. Unfortunately, I didn't learn from Mary Alice. I went straight to Google, assuming that this was like some queer advocate, the first gay mayor of some state that is, I don't know, like Wyoming. But then I learned about it, and it was awful. I remember being at my computer in my room and tearing up because I didn't know that something so awful could happen. I kept reading about it, hoping that the sources I was reading were wrong, or maybe oversimplifying it, and it wasn't. And so when we started putting the ride together, I remember being so angry and sad and confused because all of the events I had done with Pride before had always been exciting and happy and joyful, and there's nothing happy about this.
Nate, you weren't in the audience, but I think the question still applies. What drew you to this piece of music, participating in it?
Yeah. So this was the Maine premiere of this work. It was intended to be, just a little history, it was intended to be performed, I think in 2020. I was to be a singer in that performance, actually, with Choral Art in Portland. And it was largely prepared, ready to go, and then, I don't even think I need to say it, COVID, all together now, COVID. And so it sidelined the project, and it never quite got off the ground after that. And so we were kind of waiting for the right time, and in the meantime, flash forward a few years, I was stepping into my current role as artistic director of the Gay Men's Chorus, and my dear friend, Dr. Rebecca Dewan, had become an assistant professor at the University of Maine in music education, and was conducting one of the choirs there, one of the student choirs there, and was also getting ready to step into her new role as artistic director of Acadia Choral Society out of Ellsworth. And so we were hanging out at my house over the summer, just kind of excitedly preparing for those new roles, and sort of talking about our hopes and dreams for our respective groups and what we wanted to see. And she happened to mention this work, and she said, I really want to do this. And so we were kind of talking about how that could happen, and all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute. How powerful would it be if ... right? We had the Gay Men's Chorus on stage, and this story was coming from their voices, and that was the premiere. And that was really the start of the conversation, and so we're two people that when you get us together, we sort of feed off of one another's energy, and before we knew it, we said, are we doing this? I think we're doing this. And so that led to a collaboration between MGMC, between Acadia Choral Society, the Collegiate Chorale at the University of Maine, and the auditioned university singers at the University of Maine. And so we rehearsed separately for the months leading up to the process. There were a lot of communication, a lot of behind the scenes meetings that happened. But really sort of putting the puzzle pieces together with the instrumentalists, with all the singers, happened over the course of a weekend. We arrived on a Friday evening, had our first rehearsal, we sang through everything on a Friday evening, rehearsed all day Saturday, and then Sunday afternoon we did a performance. And so, yeah. So I mean, it was incredible the amount of work that happened, but I think what I walk away from that with is such a gratitude for the camaraderie that formed amongst the singers, certainly, regardless of age. So many of our singers were like, these are college kids, they're great, like I love this energy, they're so fun. And sort of seeing those connections that happened organically over the course of the weekend. But I think what really struck me as I think back on this experience was really encapsulated by, it was an alum of the university singers at UMaine who was at the performance and sent an email after the fact and said, I was sitting in the audience of this, and there were so many powerful moments in the music and these moments that really moved me. But he's like, but the thing that I will always carry with me is partway through, there was a moment where the woman sitting next to me who I didn't know and myself were clearly having a hard time like just keeping it together. And we reached over and held each other's hands and stayed that way for the rest of the performance. And that to me just says everything about kind of what that experience meant in one anecdote. I think for the performers, for the audience, and just the community that I remember feeling in that space for those couple of hours is something that I know all of our members will always hold dear.
There was quite a bit of hand-holding and hugging in the audience.
Yeah.
As well. One thing I wanted to mention from what you said is, I was amazed, and I'm more amazed now, that you started Friday night with all the pieces of the puzzle together. Because one of the things that was so impressive is I thought we would just be coming to a choir singing. But people walk out, and the percussionists were so busy, and their solos, and it was just so beautifully choreographed. And I'm surprised to hear that it all happened in a short weekend. Yeah.
Thank you.
The next question I prepared is, an oratorio is a traditional classical music form, Handel's Messiah. Was the music you heard what you expected, and did it speak to you? And that's for the whole panel.
I think the music was just beautiful. It was so emotionally tied to what everybody was feeling, that just like you said, the audience and clothes, and of course, you know, we're just connected. It just softened the whole experience of the murder itself. And I think particularly the tribute that the father said to spoke with the nature part of it was really brought out by the music and made very poignant, and it really touched everybody's heart.
Any other response?
I didn't have a ton of expectations because I'd never been to a choir show before, but I think it absolutely blew me out of the water. It was something that I will remember for the rest of my life, and I agree with what Lou said. It was extremely emotional for everybody in the choir and everybody to put things together, and the entire audience. It was just absolutely beautiful.
Despite popular belief, oratorios
Yes?
aren't super popular with teenagers right now. And when I first found how long the concert was going to be, it was a little bit daunting. But from bow to stern, hearing that kind of sound in that kind of way, it was chilling. It was, I mean, the words weren't the only things making me cry.
No, that's right. The yodel. At the end, that hold together. Just brought tears.
It was one of the concerts I've been to in my lifetime where I entered the theater kind of confused about what we were going to hear, and I left thinking this is one of the most emotional, important, and life-changing things that I will ever experience in a theater. The other time was in my own home of Woodstock across the border. We heard Jeremy Dutcher, the indigenous singer from Canada, and I entered the theater thinking, I don't know what this is going to be like and whether I'll like it or not, and I left there thinking like this was just such a great night. And I think when concerts, theater, the performing arts can do that, it's what they're supposed to do. We hope they do. Which leads to the next question, and I'm going to start this with Nate initially, but I hope others will join in. Nate, why is art, in this case an oratorio, not the most popular art form with the teenage demographic, an appropriate medium through which to memorialize and interpret an event like the death of Matthew Shepard? How does it help us to deal with such a tragedy, especially with processing the trauma?
I think first of all, what a fabulous set of questions. I think first of all, it helps to kind of define a little bit what an oratorio is. And for me, I think the easiest way to think about what it is, especially if you have no sense of music history or like I've never heard that word until right now, one of the things that helps me think about kind of where it fits into the musical art form is sitting it next to its sort of cousin, opera. So if you walk into an opera, I'll start there. If you walk into an operatic performance, it's really all about storytelling. And that's true for oratorio as well. Opera and oratorio are both at the heart of their forms, all about storytelling. It's just the way that they tell those stories are a little bit different. And so if you were to walk into an operatic performance, there are certain things you'd expect to see. The subject matter is typically secular, so non-religious. You would expect to see costumes, makeup, sets, lighting, sometimes dancing, ballets, often lots of people on stage. And musically, it's a large-scale work, obviously, large-scale performance. And musically, some of the things that you would expect to hear are everything from solo numbers, often very dramatic solo numbers, sometimes funny, sometimes it can be any emotion, but also duets, trios, large-scale chorus numbers, sometimes with as many as 200 singers on stage. And so musically, it's a really flexible kind of form, and you can kind of mold it into whatever you want it to be. And I share this about opera because even if you don't know a whole lot about it, people tend to get like a stereotypical picture, the lady in the horns, right, standing and singing loudly, that sort of drama. So flip to oratorio. Oratorio and opera musically are very similar, but the big differences are oratorio is typically historically a sacred art form, so religious subject matter, and it's typically performed in a concert style, so minus all of the flashy stuff that you see. We call it sometimes park and bark, right? You stand and sing. But musically, you still would expect to see. You would hear things that we call recitative and aria, those really emotional solo songs. You would also expect to hear, again, duets, trios, those big choral numbers. And so the form of the music, the way that those puzzle pieces fit together, are actually really similar between those two genres. And so I share this because I think it's important to know that, to sort of understand how storytelling, how they're so conducive to storytelling. Because they're so flexible, I think they're really great vehicles for sharing about the complexity of the human experience, right? So if you think about love, is love always happy and cheerful? No. If any of you have been in very long-term relationships, then there are some days where you're like, don't talk to me, I'm not in the mood, right? or it's like, oh, I love you to bit. So there are all kinds of complex emotions that are rolled into that experience of love. And I think the same is true for when we talk about grief, when we talk about trauma, right? It would be very easy to look at the story of Matthew Shepard and only focus on his death. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about this piece of music, is that, we keep talking about yodeling, right? And you think, like, how on earth does yodeling fit into this? Well, this is Laramie, Wyoming, right? It's the country, and so it sets the scene, it sets this picture, it sort of transports you to this very different place. And so it's really a necessary part of telling the story. And so I think it's really beautiful that we've taken this complex art form, right? And then paired it with this really complex story that is not just about the death of Matthew Shepard, but also about the joy of his life and the legacy. And it tells this story. I think what's beautiful about this particular oratorio is that it tells the story of his whole experience and the impact of his murder through a lot of different vantage points. And some of those viewpoints are people who were involved, so like the words of his father, for example. But it's even one of the recurring motifs that comes back is you hear songs performed from the perspective of the fence that he was tied to. And so even inanimate objects that are an important part of the story. And so I'm a big believer that complicated stories require sort of complex vehicles through which we can tell those stories. And so that's really why I think oratorio is such a fitting way to tell this story that has so much to say.
I think if I had a preconception of an oratorio, I was going to hear a choir singing in Latin. And what was so special about this was the vernacular, from reading from newspapers and, as you say, the yodeling. I wonder if other people on our family, did you find that it helped you deal with or heal from the impact of what you each had learned, some fairly recently, about Matthew Shepard? Was it helpful in that way?
I would say absolutely. Like I think, like Nate said, the complexity of it, and really through the whole show, you kind of go through every emotion. Like you feel that joy of like how he was in his life, and even the legacy he's left behind in his life. And then you feel all of that sadness. But I really do think that, yeah, you feel all of it.
It was a wonderful medium to express the whole story. I was really impressed with the ordinary boy, how they went back and talked about his early life as an ordinary boy. That was all throughout the whole performance itself. The music just pulled it all together, the narration. And it wasn't until afterwards, it's a 20-page libretto that they, I pronounce that right? Anyway, that I pulled off afterwards, thanks to Mary Alice, and that really put the whole narration part of it in perspective for me. You could really understand it, but the performance itself was just magnificent.
I'm a huge theater kid. And while there is a bit of a difference between this performance and theater, as I watched it, I could see a lot of the crossovers. And as I mentioned before, it was this big, new, shocking thing that I didn't quite understand. I just knew it was sad and confusing. But experiencing it through a medium that I love and that I've learned everything I can about, it helped me understand that too, in a way that was less scary and more safe.
Jump to another question which I think is meaningful to some of us in the room. The Pride Ride is a chartered bus starting in Presque Isle through ART, which is short for Aristic Regional Transportation System. And we took it to several of us here. I think there were 20-some, 30-some on the bus this summer going to Bangor Pride. And then several of us took it to see the oratorio. Was the Pride Ride, particularly returning afterwards, a significant part of this event for those of you who were on it?
Quiet. We all share the same feelings. Return home. While we were chatting away all the way down, coming home was quite different.
I think it wasn't easy, because even though it was a beautiful performance, it was really hard. And even though, as you mentioned, we didn't really talk much, I think it was nice to be surrounded by people who were experiencing the same sad in the same way.
Another question I prepared. Some of you weren't alive when Matthew Shepard was murdered. For others, it's a long ago, it's a distant memory. Was your understanding shaped or influenced by the concert? Were you alive when he was murdered, Dave?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm flattered that you had to ask.
I was alive when Charlie Harvey was murdered.
Yes, so was I. I was overlooking the spot.
Oh dear. I think one of the things I talked to my grandson, who's gay, was a college student, took me back to when he was in college at Virginia Tech. And I talked to him about this and sent him the photo. And his comment was the difference between a rural area and an urban area. Wyoming was rural. And the fear that is different for gays in that area is the same fear he feels when he comes to visit Maine in Maine. And it was difficult to hear that. And I thought it was very important that there is that, to recognize that, and recognize the fact that he had to overthink everything he does.
It sounds like it led you to a wonderful conversation with your grandson. Yeah. Any others? I wonder if there are questions from our congregation? Anyone? Or from Zoom meeting? Is there anybody on Zoom who has a question for our panel or a discussion point for our group?
Dan.
Are there recordings of the concert available for purchase?
Sadly, there are not.
Oh, I was hoping I was going to hear it.
So do you plan to do another performance?
So this was kind of a one and done deal, and primarily, to be perfectly honest, I think it was just the complexity of getting the performance forces all together from sort of disparate parts of the state, and it was an expensive project. That was really, we worked for, I would say we probably took a year to apply for grants. This was largely grant funded from a variety of sources to really make sure that we could move forward and make it happen. And that was for this, just for this one-time performance. So there were a lot of moving parts that we're really grateful that came together to make it happen. And as lovely as that is, I know it's also kind of a bummer because we were
Well,
like,
it isn't for me, because I did get to see it, and I'm glad I went.
good.
But I just know that so many other people that didn't get to see it, you know, it is an incredible piece. It makes me emotional just to say those words, because I was so moved by it. It was beautiful,
Thank you for being part of it.
absolutely.
YouTube has a number of different groups, choral groups from mostly from colleges that perform it. It's not the same, not as good.
And I was gonna say to your comment, Lou, about your grandson, I have a nephew that lives in Massachusetts, and he, I think, feels very much like he can blend in much easier because he lives in a more, you know, populated area. Although I think he keeps, you know, himself rather close. But he has often said to me, you know, I'd love to come to Maine, I'd love to come to Houlton where all those, you know, all those gay bashing people live. And I said, it makes me scared, you know, it makes me sad. It makes me very sad because I want him to be more of a part of my life. But I certainly respect and understand that rural sense of, excuse me, but I find it ignorance, and it's really sad. It's really sad. It breaks my heart. I really relate to that comment you had about your grandson feeling that he feels uncomfortable coming here.
Other questions?
I too have a transgender grandson who's now 37, I believe, in Portland. He grew up here. It was a very difficult, miserable life for him. And he moved after he got out of high school. He went to Portland with his mother. And he still continued to have a hard time for a while. And we really worried about him, but it was gradually down there, he was able to become his true self, but it took years. But this is a very hard area. I think most small towns are like this.
The climate today is not encouraging,
Not at all. No, it isn't. It isn't, but he has a very, very good life. He's even married, and of course I love him. He's a gentle, kind, caring man.
Catherine?
So one of the things that I have reflected a lot on after seeing the performance, there were times when it was so uncomfortable. The music was so discordant, and I didn't enjoy it. And there were parts of it that were so beautiful and soaring, and like you just felt yourself opening up. And I've thought a lot about that kind of dichotomy, and have thought a lot about how music can help us feel those things. And I know that those moments when I was sitting in my seat going, I don't know that I can take another minute of this, I was supposed to feel that way. And so I really learned something, and in working with Stephen as we were getting music going and everything, just listening to the pieces again and reflecting on the meaning of all of it, the beautiful and the ugly, was really meaningful to me. So.
Thank you for that. And that was also a challenge, I think, from a performance aspect too, especially because the way that we had divided the music up to perform, not everyone was singing the entire work. So certain groups, like the gay men's chorus, sang certain movements of the piece, either alone or in conjunction with everyone else. But there were moments over the course of the preparation process where I had to sort of say, like, there were going to be uncomfortable moments, especially as a gay men's chorus, when you're hearing, like, there's one movement called a protest, and the text comes from the things that people were chanting, the Westboro Baptist Church were chanting, and things that were on their signs. And so there are slurs in the music, and it's sung really aggressively, it's really pointed, and you realize that it's so uncomfortable to sit and watch an experience and to hear, but it's also a really necessary part of, like, you can't cut that part out of the story and get a whole sense of what the experience is, right? At least not in a completely honest way. But that also meant that I had to we didn't sing those words, and so it would have been easy to sort of gloss over that until performance time, but it made me as a director have to be really intentional about saying, you are going to hear some things that are going to be uncomfortable. And you might feel them in a way that's different than the other people singing this music because of the identities that we hold. And so, yeah, I'm right there with you, and that sort of led me to remember that part of the experience too from a performer angle.
Stephen, I know that a couple of people have made reference to the angels, Mary Alice's poem did. Could you just explain a little bit, or could someone on the panel talk a little bit about the angels and Westboro Baptist and all of the...
Nate, are you up on that?
Not really.
Okay. And I know this primarily from the movie The Laramie Project, but Fred Phelps' Westboro Baptist Church came to protest at his funeral. Horrible, horrible rhetoric, just terrible anger, so hard for his family, and volunteers, activists got together in advance anticipating this, and somebody stop me if I'm wrong, but they made out of sheets great angel wings, and there's a picture of it someplace. Downstairs on one of the posters. And knowing the protesters were going to be there, the family needed to get to the funeral, they just stood between the family and the protesters with their wings out. And so if you see that picture of all these people marching with their wings, angel wings stretched out, that is what was happening. They were shielding the mourners from the protest that was going on, and it was ugly. Other questions?
I don't have a question, I just have a comment, I guess.
Good.
And my comment is that as somebody for whom hearing is not my strong suit, and so therefore, like, when I go to concerts, I very rarely ever understand the words. Like, I don't understand, I don't know what words are necessarily being said because of how they're being said. But I knew that when I was going, and, been doing it a while. And I will say that, I was, Matthew Shepard would be 50 this year. I was a college senior. My roommate was from Wyoming. She says that Aroostook County is the only part of New England that is worthwhile going to because it was the same kind of feeling as where she grew up. And the sheer feeling, the emotions of that room on that concert day were absolutely astonishing. And again, very few of the words did I actually understand what was being said. But it didn't matter, I don't think. I mean, I have gone to read the words, so I know what it says, but I don't know that it mattered. It was the emotion. It was, sitting with young people who weren't around at that time. And it was sitting north of where Charlie Howe, right? Like where he would live. And that was what was so powerful to me, was just that overwhelming like waves of sound and emotion, and it was just beautiful and horrible and terrible and astonishing. Is a good word. So I thank you for that.
We've chatted about how tough it was and how emotional it was. But, opera's not over till the fat lady sings and stuff. And there was a climax it had to have been the end, and everybody in the audience was up on their feet. And the cheering was amazing. There was a celebration of what had happened. And the conductor, I don't know his name, but he was heroic that day. He stood on stage like this, didn't move. And you knew something more was going to come. But the audience was so appreciative at that moment. It was a magnificent outpouring of emotion. And then a young man came out and yodeled. And it was amazing moment, I thought. And I thought it was a celebration as well. Other questions? Comments? I thought so. I thought you had a question.
I did. It was answered, because I also wondered if you would repeat this, but I wasn't at the performance, sadly. However, my perception is the audience members were allies of community. And I wonder if this project can be used to educate people, to teach the younger generation, not only just what happened, but the impact it had and how things have changed, but yet are still the same. And I wonder if anyone's put any thought to that. Just using it as a tool for educating others.
I can speak to that, and maybe a broader response that you'd like. So one of the priorities of MGMC is to sort of increase our outreach. Our name is the Maine Gay Men's Chorus, yet like so many of the LGBTQ+ support resources, we are primarily condensed in the southern Maine area. Yet the vast majority of Maine are rural areas, right? We know this. And so many of the resources are centralized to that more populated sort of southerly part of the state. And so we've thought a lot as an organization about really how to expand outreach. I think one of the most beautiful takeaways of this experience, as we've heard, was the sense of community that it built and the sense of connection. And so I guess I'll say first that we are actively thinking of ways to really get out more and really get up more. And sort of what kinds of opportunities, even if not a repeat of this performance, what kinds of opportunities, whether it's day-long workshops that folks can come participate in for a day and experience what we get to experience every week in rehearsal, or a weekend kind of symposium held elsewhere in the state. So we are very open to ideas, so if there are things that you'd like to see that you're like, oh, wouldn't it be great if ... please feel free to reach out to me. Stephen has my contact information, and please feel free to share it if anyone asks. But I think the other thing that I would say, aside from that piece, has to do with the train has left the station. It's been a long couple of days. I'll think of it. I'll get back to you.
While you're thinking of it, there's an ulterior motive involved in inviting and hoping that you will come here today, because I would love to have the director of the Maine Gay Men's Chorus see the concert space just behind those doors. So you're going to get a tour before you leave.
Thank you. It's
available.
The train came back. I thought of that.
You're welcome.
That does, thank you. That does pertain to this particular performance. We were very intentional about, for some of those reasons that I mentioned, we were very intentional about wanting to hold this concert opportunity in central Maine. When we were applying for grants, when we were reaching out and trying to advertise, we really we acknowledge the fact that, as I said, so many support resources and opportunities are in the southern part of the state, and so we felt really strongly that it needed to be elsewhere, to be more accessible to the rest of Maine. And so that part was really intentional, and I just want to say I'm really grateful to those of you that attended, that helped others to attend and make that an accessible opportunity, because it was heartwarming and really incredible to hear that there was such a large group of folks coming to support us from the coordinations of those two organizations. So many thanks to all of you.
We're a little bit past time for, normal, we start a little bit late. We have one last song from the oratorio. It is one of the songs called The Fence, and I believe it is the fence itself that is narrating what's going on. And then we'll have time for candles of joy and concern if everybody wants to hang and do that. I have a small gift for you. In nearby New Brunswick, where I grew up, a few years ago, young queer activists pulled together a photo exhibit called Lennon Cub and we've done a service here at this church about the photos, but we walked into the Beaverbrook Art Gallery. I have a picture of myself standing in front of the Lennon Cub photo that was a bit bigger than life. And it is a book of photos that were discovered in an estate sale of two men who recorded their love, documented it in photographs 100 years ago, between 1921 and 1931 in rural New Brunswick. We've talked some here today about the issues of the LGBT community in rural areas, and we do have shoulders that we stand on. So this is for your library. So finally, we extinguish our chalice, and Catherine, I'm going to ask you to do that. We would like to thank all who attended today. Bless you for honoring the memory. Extend you gratitude to our special guests and visitors as we extinguish the chalice and conclude our service.
We want to thank everybody for tuning in today. If you'd like to show your support, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel if you're not already subscribed, and help us out by sharing this message by clicking the share button. If you'd like to make a monetary donation to you, Church Houlton, there is a link to our online donations in the video description down below. And again, thank you so much and have a blessed day.